Gains.
No, we don't want any gains.
Okay, I do.
That's the last thing we want.
I do.
Nice slurp.
Yeah. It's too hot to drink normally. It's too hot to drink normally. That's how we should start, everyone.
Just with a slurp. But at the same time. And then no one will know who was sipping and who was airing.
Both of us were doing both, isn't it? That's what you said, both at the same time.
Yeah. So I'm thinking the best way to sort of start would be to go through and discuss the plan with the podcast. So a podcast about podcasts.
You should be telling me this on the podcast.
I am recording right now.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I purposefully started recording without you knowing so that I could try and work my way into it naturally.
That's really
But now
clever.
you've ruined that.
No, I mean, it's even better this time because
Yeah.
this is a stupid thing that's happened at the start.
Immediately.
Okay.
So it's going to be like a podcast about podcasts. So it's going to be meta as fuck.
So unbelievably meta.
So would you describe yourself as a neuropharmacologist? Is that that's the field you're working in at the minute? That's certainly what you're interested in at the very least, right?
I would describe it. It's like Neil Tyson says. Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Is it deGrasse or deGrasse?
I think it's deGrasse. I would say
thought it was
deGrasse. I was just being a bit of an idiot, to be honest. I was mocking his name slightly.
Yeah.
It's a bit of an extra name, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
deGrasse.
Yeah.
And he always puts his
You just call yourself Neil Tyson.
Neil
wouldn't you?
Tyson,
Yeah.
like Mike, but don't bite anyone's ear off.
Yeah.
So like Neil says, he's always saying, "I'm not any kind of ist. I'm just a scientist."
Scientist, right? But that's still an ist, Neil.
It is still an ist, Neil. Just a scientist. So I would say,
But in terms of like brains and the effects drugs have on brains.
Oh, that's the specialism for sure. My little niche area is for sure neurology and drugs.
Yes.
So neuropharmacology is the masters that I'm studying for.
It's the best way to describe what you're doing.
It's if you were to boil down what I'm really interested in. I mean, that's what obviously like we'll get into. We've got a wide range of far scope and interests.
Yeah,
that
for sure.
is really far and wide
Yeah.
beyond what probably most
Especially
people
when
tend to
combined
think about.
together as well.
Oh,
Because
for
you're
sure.
into some things that I'm not into. I'm into some things that you're not into. But obviously you as a neuropharmacologist and me now going into psychology, the plan, in my opinion, is sort of to reach from science and medicine, that sort of thing, through psychology, because they are linked. And then on the other side have philosophy and that sort of thing. Because I'm thinking those are the three things. That's the best way to sort of dumb down the things that we are mainly interested in, I think.
Oh yeah, if there were three areas, then you go from the really hard science, the pure science of biology and neuropharmacology specifically, and then obviously you work that through your interests, which is the slightly more abstracted case of the psychology.
Yeah.
And then eventually what comes from that is you
To
gain
the completely abstract notion of some philosophical ideas. Yeah.
that can come from obviously both of the
Both of those things, yeah.
previous things.
Obviously, we'll talk about other stuff that we're interested in as well, like music, film and entertainment, that sort of thing. But I think those three things are mainly... Well, I think we'll always try and bring things back to those, one of, if not all of those three subjects.
Yeah, I would say it's a holistic approach to looking at life and what people have to deal with on a day-to-day basis.
What does holistic mean?
Holistic is so that just looking at things on a whole.
Oh, okay.
So it would be looking at
Like a generalist.
Yeah. So what I'm thinking is obviously psychology deals with how people are thinking and feeling about things on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, neuropharmacology is specifically very health orientated. Maybe you could get into some cultural things if you want to talk about sort of recreational drug use and the history and how that's going for people at the minute. Obviously, there's the drug war that's been waging on for 30, 40 years now, 50 years.
I don't know whether you will have heard of this. I think I read something, I don't know where it was, about a state in America. Is it decriminalizing psychedelic mushrooms or something like that?
Denver, Colorado and Denver have recently decriminalized. I mean, yeah, that's a big thing in specifically related to that is nobody hears about stuff like that. I mean, I was talking to people in the field, obviously neuropharmacologists, who had no idea that had happened. And I mean, if you're into neuropharmacology, if you're into drugs at all,
you should know. You should be at least following the right people to find out about stuff like that.
It's a super big deal. I mean, really, it should be published in stuff like newspapers and general media. But
I suppose it's quite hush-hush because people don't necessarily understand it, or because of the stigma that is attached to stuff like that.
There's definitely a government pressure on media outlets to not talk about the positive side of some of these recreational drugs that are used recreationally, but then also have other uses in terms of, obviously, there's the trials that are ongoing for PTSD with people using MDMA. There's lots of these uses where we can't look at them because there are these pressures from the government and the law.
And the law, yeah, for sure. But we'll definitely talk in depth about stuff like that.
Deep dive into the specifics of neuropharmacology and how that's going in culture.
But what sort of stuff do you think you personally would be interested in talking about?
Obviously, aside from the main that niche specialism, obviously.
Yeah.
Some of my interests, obviously, training the gym quite a bit and know a little bit about that. I think that could be quite helpful if people want to hear about stuff like that. I mean, there's a lot of misinformation regarding training and healthy lifestyles.
And you've been doing stuff like that for years now. Obviously, you've been on and off, certainly over the last few years, due to uni and other stuff. But you've been, like I say, training on and off for, when did you start? Maybe 17, 18?
Yeah, I was working out. Well, I mean, I was working out the other day. So really, on and off, if you want to include from when I first stepped in a gym, it's probably drawing on about 13 years. But
Jesus.
Yeah, because there's
I didn't realise it was that long.
Do you remember sumos?
Ah,
so we obviously did weightlifting style training there.
Yeah.
But it wasn't
While I was running around jumping over pommel horses and being a general knob,
getting punched in the face.
Yeah, and knocking myself out on a wall.
Yeah, that's what we like.
Yeah,
that's what we like. So health and fitness is a big one, and I like to think, because of my scientific background, there's a lot of people that think health and fitness isn't really science related. Like, people think, you hear like anecdotal stories and everyone thinks, oh, that's really relevant and I need to incorporate that into what I'm doing. I need to incorporate that into my training. And it's just not true. Like, a lot of people, obviously there's the whole steroids debacle as well, about people taking steroids, using them, then getting, say, supplement deals, stuff like that.
Right.
Not really being open about their use and misleading the general public into...
making people think that due to this specific training routine, that's why they're so huge, when in actual fact they've just been pumping themselves full of steroids.
Yeah, that's it.
Right.
Outside of stuff like science specifically, like you were talking about, obviously we've both got quite a strong music background.
Yes.
A wide range of music tastes, from a great different, many varied ranges of genres. Yeah. And
more genres. I think my music taste, certainly at the minute, is more niche than yours is. You've always been into a huge range of different music.
That's just because I like weird stuff.
Yeah. Really weird stuff.
Yeah, so I can listen to the weird stuff and then end up...
Especially now that you can sort of break it down and analyse it in the way that you can.
Yeah, learning music theory. I mean, I think that's a bit esoteric. So very niche, very specialist.
Yes. Well, it's like we've spoken about quite recently, is even the stuff that I've learned in terms of music theory over the last 6 months, a lot of musicians, in quotation marks, don't even know stuff like that.
Yeah, it's something it's hard to come by, because a lot of music teachers just teach you the very practical side of music.
Exactly. Think about the amount of music teachers that we've been involved with over the last sort of 10, 15 years. And the sort of interesting side of music theory hasn't even been introduced to us until you went and found out yourself through watching YouTube videos and stuff like that.
Specifically, guys like Rick Beato, Adam Neely.
Mm-hmm. Is Rick Beato the one who did the whiteboard one that we were watching?
Yeah.
Old guy, grey hair.
Lots of whiteboard videos. He's great.
And Neely's the bass
player.
Yeah.
But I think getting into talking about music and the cultural influence that music has and the cultural sort of riverbed that music shaped for itself would be super interesting. But getting into the more theoretical aspects, like we said, I think it's a little bit niche. There's definitely people filling that gap at the minute already. I think you'd need a channel dedicated specifically to that.
And to be able to do it better than the people that are already doing it is unlikely, unless, like you're saying, you dedicate most of your time to both learning and presenting that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's a rough job trying to compete, especially as we're not necessarily very highly accomplished musicians. We just play it.
We just enjoy it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's more of a hobby than anything else. We've never really been paid or anything like that for playing music.
No.
And then competing with people who, like Adam Neely, went to Berkeley.
People who we would never catch up with in any way.
Exactly, and they're already presenting in such a strong, powerful way. Like Adam Neely, very targeted towards sort of the younger generation and making memes.
Whereas Rick being targeted, as he is an older guy, to older musicians who maybe already have a base knowledge, maybe a bit more than base knowledge of music theory, but that want to extend that further.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I just don't think you could. Even if you wanted to put something together, I think really a lot of the niches that exist within that sort of scope are kind of filled now.
Yeah.
And guys are doing really well. So, but
no need sort of going into depth.
But definitely, I'd love to talk about the culture and the history of music and how that's going.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what other interests I have.
Well, I've sort of got a little sort of list here of things that. It's only a brief list of sort of things that I think would be little interesting things to potentially talk about. Things like space. Mike, who we'll be talking to at some point, suggested sort of UFOs and the concept of life beyond this planet. The future as well as the past in general. There's loads of stuff that could be drawn from that. Our own lives, as we've sort of touched on just. Yeah. Interesting technological stuff. So CRISPR is something that you sort of briefly told me about a few months ago, which would be really interesting to sort of go a bit deeper on that.
Yeah, and obviously definitely something that's sort of picking up in terms of pace.
Very topical at the minute, and will increase in the amount that it is topical.
If people know about that, I don't know. There was some people in my specialism who
didn't even know that was happening.
Heard about the China debacle.
Yeah.
I love that word, debacle.
Debacle.
That's the word of the day.
Word of the day, debacle.
Debacle.
And then the last thing I've got here is more political stuff like identity politics. Obviously, I've just bought Jordan Peterson's book, 12 Rules for Life, which I'm going to start reading tomorrow night.
Do you know he's published another one?
No, I did not.
It's 12 more rules.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, part 2. Interesting.
So the first one is... the subtitle, An Antidote to Chaos. Second one is More Than Just Mere Order. Something like that.
Okay, so it is quite literally an extension of what he's
just finishing the job, I think.
Yeah, sure.
And people didn't really like the fact that he would say that chaos is a more feminine type of energy, generally, historically, when you look at myths.
Yes.
And that people...
In terms of like hysteria, that concept of hysteria. And
people didn't necessarily like him saying an antidote to chaos. But I think the point with the two books is that he's trying to balance the two.
Okay, rather than it seeming one-sided and people being able to pick at things that...
Well, I think if you have too much order, you end up losing all your creativity and your imagination. But if you have too much chaos, then you can't actually put that creativity down anywhere.
Yeah, as Thanos says, perfect balance.
Well, yeah, but then he killed half the population of the entire universe.
Yeah, I'm impressed that you knew.
I know the click.
Nice.
I know the click.
I'm very impressed with that, considering you've seen like 2 Marvel films.
2 Marvel films. Not many Marvel films. Have I even seen 2 Marvel films? That'd be a good thing to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. That's something that obviously I'm more into than you.
You and Mike could talk about it though, for sure.
Yes, considering we studied it. Well, if you tried to, and then left after a few months.
Yep. That's the dream.
Yeah. Jesus.
So you and Mike talking about, especially even some of your projects, well, Mike's projects maybe.
Yeah, some of the stuff we have done in the past, like the 4 Hours film that Mike made that I acted in, as well as some of the stuff that we've planned to do and maybe haven't had time for or haven't bothered to do.
What other stuff is Mike? What other stuff? I don't know much about Mike. I need to talk to Mike more.
We'll have to like sit down, all three of us, and just have a huge conversation where we all chat about, basically do what we're doing here, but obviously allow Mike to talk about what he's interested in and stuff like that.
Gaffer tape his mouth shut.
Just so he can't talk.
Yeah, that's sort of what I was getting at with the holistic thing, right? I think all of the things that we've just listed together, that it's very much a look at how people live their lives, what things will be relevant to people on a sort of day-to-day basis, what people go through. It's a very, I would say to get a really good idea, it's just about the human experience. That's what we're going to be talking about.
For sure.
The human experience and
everything will sort of link together. That's why I like that logo that we've got, because it's in terms of everything being interwoven, loads of different things, different colours in that aspect being interwoven. I quite like that. Yeah,
different cultures, different types of people. And
I was thinking actually, this wouldn't be happening if you hadn't shown me podcasts, because before you showed me clips of Joe Rogan or Steven Crowder, I'd never watched anything of any podcasts.
I think obviously you've been thinking about stuff like this for quite a long time
in terms of general creative endeavors and having some sort of platform to what would you say, put that onto,
push ideas out
and think and yeah, like you're saying, more than anything, push ideas out. And
I think that's it comes down to why these podcasts have been having successes in the way that they have. I mean, I don't know about you, but if I go about my day-to-day life, maybe not at the minute being so involved with science,
yes,
but especially prior to that, you go around and you think who would be interested in this stuff. Really, it's quite hard to think who's watching this, but then you look, clearly the society,
there's
Western
an interest,
society
for sure,
is crying out for this,
for knowledge,
ideas,
and conversations about interesting and intricate topics, for sure. And I think one thing people have been talking about a lot in terms of why podcasts in general have been so successful recently is the fact that, you will have heard this as well, that there's a lot of unused learning time. If you're ambiently washing the pots or driving to work or whatever else it may be, where your body is focused on one task, but your mind doesn't necessarily have to focus entirely on that task. There's a lot of this time that up until literally a few years ago was unused intellectually.
Just dead space.
Yeah,
dead
for
space.
Sure. And now that's being filled up thanks to technology and stuff like that, and the ability to listen to these things basically wherever you are.
Technology, yeah, for sure. And I think it's probably we obviously talk a little bit about how technology is negatively impacting society. And I think if anything's really going to save that and give us something to work towards positively, it's going to be stuff like that. It's going to be people having the sort of heavier conversations, the more interesting conversations, the more highbrow conversations online.
To allow people to gain this knowledge in an ambient way throughout their lives.
Yeah, rather than, getting
watching
phone,
cat videos
or your phone buzzing and clicking that little red button that says 1 every single time just for that dopamine rush.
Literally. Yeah. But in terms of there's 3 podcasters that you introduced me to. So there's Joe Rogan, who is probably the one I've watched the most. Then there's Steven Crowder, who I've watched a little bit less than Joe Rogan. And there's one who I've basically not watched at all. Not for any particular reason, just because I haven't thought to, I think. And that's Sam Harris. But I did actually watch a TED Talk that he did the other day that scared the absolute shit out of me.
Is this the AI one?
Yeah. Because it's just that notion of, as is with a lot of technologies, but I think more so with AI, is once it's there, you can't really undo it. And it's that lack of control as well. Once it's out there, I think he was talking about how, I don't know how many times it is, but electrical signals can be passed like X times faster than signals in the brain, right? So by default, AI will be able to learn, not quite, but infinitely quicker than us, at a rate that we cannot ever surpass or even match. So once that happens, there's no control over that.
Yeah, I think it's hard. People aren't really, when people think about stuff like this, the dangers of advancing technology, and specifically when it comes down to AI, people aren't really following the conclusion through. So people think it's going to be like the Terminator, where we're going to have an humanoid android thing that's going to just decide that it wants to kill all the humans.
But that's not how it's going to go.
Yeah.
Even do you know that robot Sophia that they've been claiming recently? It's like a bald woman with an actual like human-ish face. Mm-hmm. I watched a video about that because at first, when you watched that video maybe a year or two ago, that was quite fascinating because you go, "Oh my god, you could have an interfaceable AI that you can actually talk to as if you were a human." But I watched a video where sort of people would come up, they'd invite people up where the Sophia was sitting on a stage and ask it questions, and it just seemed like the same, in quotation marks, AI that's been around for the last 15 years
Chatbot.
That's just got pre-programmed responses, but not intelligence by any stretch. Like Siri, it's basically Siri but with a physicality, and that's not impressive.
Yeah, so here's the thing about how AI normally tends to work when you're really building, say, I know a little bit about evolutionary algorithms and stuff like that. Normally you need to give it a goal. So you would say, a lot of times, for example, I've watched quite a few where they'll take an AI system and they'll get it to learn how to play a game. A lot of the times what they'll do is they'll just say, right, do random things
until it works.
Your goal is to win the game, right? Whereas what's your goal in a social interaction? What's your goal in a conversation? It changes.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to get something to...
You need to, in order to be a conversationalist AI, it needs some form of consciousness. It needs opinions. It needs actual opinions rather than pre-programmed responses or something like that.
Yeah, it has to, in order to feel like a human, it has
to be unpredictable to an extent.
Do you think humans are really that unpredictable all the time?
Not all the time, but when you compare it to like a robot, like a program.
I see what you're saying.
Computer programs are designed to work in a specific way, whereas humans, you can't always know what a human's intentions are or something like that.
And that's goal setting, really, isn't it? It's like you're always going to have... I mean, let's say if your goal as an AI chatbot, for example, is to have a good interaction with the other person, please the other person, then all that bot is going to say is, it's going to give you platitudes and
it's going to give you what you want.
It's going to give you what it thinks you want.
Yeah.
Which, a lot of the time isn't going to be exactly what you want. And then it's hard to, how do you gauge someone's response?
Yeah.
From, you'd have to teach it to, recognize faces and recognize facial expressions. And really, we've got some idea of how that works in people, but not really.
Yeah.
Not in a way that we could go, oh, this is how it works, and we'll just put it in the robot.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons psychology is not a pseudoscience. Thank you very much, you git.
Well, I mean, it's like real science, but like without the science. It's like, if you want to just talk to someone about stuff, and that's it.
Sure. Oh, you're such a prick.
Sure, go for it.
But yeah, so Sam Harris. Are there any other podcasters that you listen to, or any other people like that I don't know about?
Oh, just the rest of the alt-right. So obviously there's the Sam Harris alt-right, Joe Rogan alt-right, Steven Crowder alt-right,
Jordan Peterson alt-right.
He does some podcasts, but they're more
Shen Shapiro
alt-right. And they're all trying to have these conversations out in the open, where I think it's fair to say that that a lot of that side of the debate or the argument in terms of societal views has been kind of pushed by the wayside. Obviously, you see a lot of stuff like very inclusive and let's look out for one another and let's just give people free stuff and let's try and make everyone's lives really perfect, but with no real thought about, how you're going to manage to do that and the realistic aspect of that. It's just people being really idealistic, and you're not getting that realistic side. So I think, these guys that are quite...
They're more realistic. They're not talking about a fantasy world where everything's perfect, which isn't realistic.
Yeah.
As much as these sort of social justice warriors want this perfect world, I don't think that's realistic.
Yeah, I mean, they're intellectuals, really. Like Ben Shapiro's obviously super crazy intelligent, talks a mile a minute, and his brain can just keep up with it.
And keep going and hear everything you're saying while formulating what he is thinking at the same time.
Generating unbelievable ideas.
Yeah,
Sam's obviously very intellectual. I really like Joe, actually, because the thing about Joe is he's figuring out the ideas at the same time as the public is.
And you can see that in his podcast.
Yeah.
You can see him. He doesn't have these preconceptions or pre-opinions of the things he's talking to people about. You can see him. He sort of sits there and he thinks about what the person's saying to him, and then he'll say, "Oh, I'm thinking about this." And then if they say, "Oh, well, maybe you've not thought about this," he goes, "Oh, shit."
Yeah, and that's
what you want, I think.
That's how you learn. It's the best way for the public to learn as well. You know,
rather than shutting yourself off to new ideas, it's important to take in all the information and then formulate your opinion.
Yeah, in a kind of similar vein, Crowder does this segment called what's it called? Devil's Advocate with Scarlett Turden, which is obviously a play on what? Scarlett Turden? Tyler Durden.
Yeah. I was going to say, but I wasn't sure.
It's not. I don't understand the reference.
Yeah.
Because I've like seen half, like the first 10 minutes of the film.
Oh, because we were going to watch it, and then I don't know why we didn't end up watching it. To be fair,
God knows. But he will sit there, and he comes on as this Scarlett Turden character, and he'll then debate someone from the same side of the fence as him, but then he's presenting the opposite argument.
Yes.
And that's obviously a really good way. I mean,
well, it shows that you are actually considering both sides rather than sticking to your guns no matter what information comes to light.
Sometimes it can go a bit of both ways. Sometimes he does it whereby he's really genuinely trying to prop up the other argument, and sometimes
he's presenting it as if he is doing that, but he's actually like,
Stephen, you're kind of being a dick.